Ag Bioscience, the #1 ag tech podcast globally, is now available on video. Hear from leaders and innovators across food, animal health, plant science, ag tech, and agriculture. Mondays at 6 a.m. on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, subscribe and leave us a review. It's the Ag Bioscience Podcast with Agronovis Indiana. Get more information at agronovisindiana.com.
The internet changed how we work. AI is changing what work gets done. A bank cut loan processing from days to hours. A student built an AI scheduler, improving on-time delivery from under 70% to over 90%. Most teams know AI matters, but aren't sure where to start. InAI is Indiana's statewide AI adoption effort, built with industry, academia, and community partners, helping you move from understanding to action. Visit inaiready.com.
Whether your ROI is dollar signs or hot meals across the globe, JDA is your full-service marketing partner to help you achieve your long-term goals. Learn more at jdaworldwide.com. Empowering the extraordinary.
Be curious. I think in today's world where we can have our heads down on our phones and do stuff, get to know people. I'm probably a little too nosy more than curious. I like to know people. I like to reach out to people. I'm a big believer if you get to know people, you can't dislike them.
Yeah.
And
hi, I'm Dave Neff, host of Talent Scout. On this show, we shine a light on Indiana's next generation of leaders who are making a difference in business, community, and civic life. These are real conversations about purpose, mentorship, and building a future that matters. Join me as we invest in leadership that lasts. All right, welcome back to another episode of Talent Scout. My name is Dave Neff, and I'm thrilled today to have a longtime friend, the Director of Athletics, AD, also commonly known at Indiana University, Indianapolis, IU Indy, Luke Bosso. Luke, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Well, this is fun. I've got a soft spot for the sports world in my heart, just given my own career. But we've known each other kind of crazy, even back in like high school days, playing Friday Night Lights at Ben Billman's house back in what was that, Wincombe, right there on the Monon. So
yeah, exactly.
Life comes full circle, 25 years later. But
hasn't been that long. Come on now.
Yeah, 10 years. As with all my guests, Luke, I love to just start at the beginning. I know you're, like me, a native son of Indianapolis. We both care a lot about this city and this community. But yeah, for those that don't know, maybe just share what your childhood was like, where you grew up in Indy, what family was like.
Yeah. Grew up on the north side of Indianapolis. Proud product of Washington Township Schools, Spring Mill, Northview, North Central. Tell people I had a great experience in the Washington Township public school systems. Lucky to have two great parents who instilled a lot of great values into me. And still, as you said, native Indianapolis resident, still live in the Meridian Kessler area and really love that part of the city and the city as a whole. Yeah.
Well, I always like to ask my guests, even though you've spent majority of your career geographically in one place, or majority of your life for that matter in one place, what was sort of a shaping force from your childhood or from growing up that's kind of made you who you are today?
Yeah, I tell people all the time I hit the parent lottery. Two great parents, and for me, my parents really instilled in me a few things. I mean, one was work. As I was growing up, I was always working. Yeah. Whether it was not just sports, but working at a restaurant or really figuring out how to keep my time busy. The second one, my parents took in my best friend when we were in third grade. Lived with us for a number of years, and it was really, I was thinking back on this. It was kind of second nature. Like one day, we were taking him home. The next day, his home was our house, and my parents really made sure to welcome him, and he became my brother. Still is my brother to this day.
So that had to be kind of cool though, as a third grader, to be like, wait, my best friend's now living with us. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it was awesome. You always had somebody to play video games with, or go shoot baskets, or play games, and so that was awesome, and it kind of just showed from an early age, like you're everyone's your friend. You go welcome everyone. And the other thing on top of that, what they did, my parents were really intentional around the holidays to make sure people had places to go. So for a long time on Christmas Eve, the Fridays at Keystone the Crossing, my parents had a big table where they would invite people who didn't have somewhere to go on Christmas, or they were too far away from home. And they would come, and we'd have this big, I think as long as the franchisee owner, Sandy Levinson, owned it, my parents did it. And
what was the restaurant?
Fridays.
Fridays.
We're
TGI Fridays.
Yeah, where Creighton Merrill was, or is now. And that's really carried over. Both those things have carried over. One, in my role now, around the holidays, I make sure our student athletes have somewhere to go.
Yeah.
Holidays are hard in general, and they're even harder when you're by yourself. And, my parents still try to do that. It's funny. I'll come over on Christmas and with my wife, and there'll be somebody who we know is there. I'm like, I'll ask my dad, and it's like, well, they didn't have anywhere to go today. And it's great, and it's really shown me, like, be welcoming to everybody, and make sure people have people to be around.
Well, I can definitely vouch for that, because I see you and your dad out going on walks in the neighborhood together, which I just think is so cool, even at our age, that you guys are so close. And then Miss Terry, always seeing her at the front desk there of Harry and Izzy's, seating people. She's a mainstay in downtown Indianapolis, so that's awesome to see. So you go to North Central, which I feel like so much of the city has run through, North Central, in terms of Mitch Daniels and Mark Miles, all these great leaders that have, cut their teeth and went to school there. Yeah, what was that like, going to North Central? What were you involved in? Did you play sports?
Yeah, it was great. It's funny. I wasn't sure I was going to go to North Central. I did the look at Cathedral, Chittard, Rebuff, where my dad went, and my brother, he was always going to go to North Central, and had a lot of friends that were going there. So decided to go there. Played football and baseball while I was there. Did powerlifting while I was there. Everybody has to do an art, so I was part of the choir there. But really, the cool thing to me about North Central was how diverse it was. You had people from all over the world that you went to high school with, and you got to know people from different walks of life. And I'm always amazed by how big Washington Township is too, right? So you kind of learn different parts of the city and different folks. And it was a great experience for me. I'm a proud North Central alum, just like the people you mentioned. And in fact, being on the zoo trustee now, there's a lot of North Central alums, and so it's a fun thing, and I use it to meet with people a lot. Say, I'm an NC grad, you're an NC grad. How do we keep this together? So it was a great experience for me.
That's awesome. I believe after North Central, you elect to go to Franklin College. Is that right? So talk to us about the college decision again, just down on the south side of Indy. What led you to end up going to school there? Yeah,
so complete opposite of North Central. I tell people I graduated high school with 1,000 people, and I went to a college with 1,000 people. So, and I didn't expect to go to Franklin College. I went there mostly in part to Mike Leonard, who was the head football coach. He had just gotten the job. I was with my parents on vacation. He called and jokingly tell people that's where I learned how to make a sale. I went on the visit, and the next Monday he called and said, "Are you going to come to Franklin?" And I said, "I am." And I hadn't told anybody else I was going anywhere. So I was like, "Oh, I'll go to Franklin." And it was a great decision. Met some of my best friends there. Coach Leonard, if you can spend 1 hour around Coach Leonard, you're going to be a better person. And I got to spend 5 years around him. But kind of the opposite of North Central, right? 1,000 kids, but I got to learn where a lot of people were from. That's where a lot of people assume I learned the state from politics, which I learned a lot of things, working in the state government. But, I remember the first person I met was from Orleans, Indiana, and I'd never heard of that, right? And one of my roommates is from Huntingburg down by Jasper. And that was fun for me to learn about different parts of the state and what things we have going on around the state.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I feel like I've been on a run of Butler grads on this show, so it's great to have a Franklin College grad. So you played football. Did you play all 4 years?
Yes, okay. Yeah, I did. And then, I stuck around for a fifth year where I got to coach, and I had to finish 3 classes, which was great. It was a great experience, and because I got to spend another year around Coach Leonard and Matt Taylor, who's now the voice of the Colts. Him and I did the Franklin College basketball games together, and we made it to the NCAA tournament our senior year, which was a lot of fun and a great experience to get behind the microphone.
Yeah, he emceed our kickoff to May event just a couple months ago on the Circle. So that's a small world. Well, you mentioned, always working. Your parents made sure, like, if you weren't playing sports, you were working. I feel like I had a similar upbringing. I believe in high school and college, you did some work with the Indianapolis Indians. Is that right? So maybe fill us in, like, how did that opportunity come about? And we'll get into your career here because, you've had a interesting journey from, government, some private sector government, to now, in sports business with IU Indy. But how did the Indianapolis Indians sort of gig come about?
Yeah. So I had a good buddy, North Central guy, who was a bat boy in 2000 for the team. He's the Gibson Southern baseball coach. Just had a great run last week in the baseball state finals, but he was doing it, and I didn't drive until like my junior year of high school. And he was like, "Hey, you should become a bat boy. It's a lot of fun. You like baseball." So started in 2001 when the Indians were the Brewers affiliate. Yeah. And I tell people this, and they'll never get the credit they deserve, Dave, but I learned how to work from the guys in the clubhouse, right? I could see kind of the general way to work in sports, and Randy Lewandowski and some of those guys, and Randy's and so incredibly great friend of mine. But Bobby and Jeremy Martin were the two clubhouse managers, still are. Bobby on the home side, Jeremy on the road side. And those guys, like, your parents can tell you to work, right?
Yeah.
And they can ask you how work is, but those guys really taught me like what it means to finish the job you're doing. And they had a very different perspective on life than I did. And they taught me so many life lessons. And it's in part of the reason I'm a workaholic is because, like, when I was 15 years old, I've seen these guys work so incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And it really instilled it in me. And in fact, I go down and visit them in the clubhouse a lot. And out of just habit, like, I'll see stuff that I used to do, fold towels or do different things, and I'll start folding the towels, and they're like, "You don't have to do it." I'm like, "But I do," because like you guys said, when there's work to do, you go do them. And awesome experience, and getting to spend any time around the Indianapolis Indians is always going to be fun.
That's great. Well, that's so you and my wife actually have something in common. So when she was at the University of Louisville, the baseball team had what's called diamond dolls, and so she would run out. I love to give her grief. She was a diamond doll for, I think, a couple seasons for University of Louisville baseball, which, I hadn't heard of that until I met her. But apparently some programs, it's almost like cheerleaders. I don't know for baseball. But bat boy, diamond doll, same difference, So, well, that's great. Yeah, I mean, more is caught than taught. And to I feel like if you're going to have a career in sports, as you said, like, you got to learn to develop a motor. And so having that experience, even in high school, I'm sure was deeply transformational. So I feel like, we talk a lot about on this show, just because the name Talent Scout, it's about, highlighting emerging leaders, people that are already leading. And so we have a broad range of listeners, but especially a lot of 20s and 30 somethings. And so I feel like I always try to reinforce your 20s are about learning, right? What you're good at, what you're not good at, what you enjoy. And before you started down this path of sort of politics, public service, eventually sports, you tried a few different things those first 5 years out of college before landing at the Indy Chamber. Maybe talk to us about what those first 5 years were like, and what you were learning you were good at, not good at, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I think, and one of the things I talk to our student athletes about all the time now when they're getting ready to graduate, they're like, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to do." Right. And I think majority of us are in that position, right? You may land a job coming out of college, but you don't really know it's what you want to do till you get there. And graduated in 2008, right? The economy wasn't great. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And I probably panicked to a sense that, like, the first company that called that was going to give me a good salary, I was like, "Okay, great, we'll do that." Now, in hindsight, it was perfect for me because my boss was one of the best bosses I ever had. But I think he knew in the long run that position wasn't going to be for me, because I was behind a desk all day. I was behind a desk making phone calls, talking to people. And I was lucky enough where I became really good at it, but then I knew the baseline of, like, if I do this, I can make X and not have to work all that hard. But, times are different too, right? I mean, probably when you were at the Pacers, you were at a desk from 8:30 to 5:30 every day making phone calls, and you're doing it in an office. But I knew I didn't like that. And I knew that that was not going to be my long-term career. And I think being there showed me two really important things in my life that have helped shape what I've done moving forward. I don't want to do jobs where I'm stuck behind a desk. It's never going to be me, and not something I'll ever be happy with. And then two, the value of having a boss who understands, like, this may not be the long-term career for you, but how can I help shape that? How can I still make this experience memorable? They gave me a lot of opportunities, including the opportunity to leave Indiana for a different job with the company, and decided not to do it. So, I tell people in your early 20s, you're right. You got to figure it out. Figure out what you're good at. Figure out what you like. And if you don't like it, we used to have this, there used to be this negative thing, right? Like, I've worked in a lot of different fields, but ultimately it's the same, right? It's customer service, it's customer interaction. And I know I like talking to people and being around people every day.
Yeah. That's great. Well, you end up landing, I think it was 2013, right, with the Indy Chamber. Now you had a cool title. I don't know if a lot of people realize like what this is, and I need to be reminded. But ombudsman, that was your title. And can you enlighten our audience a little bit about what that role entailed at the Indy Chamber?
Yeah, so it was actually regulatory and permitting ombudsman.
Okay.
And I remember my second day at the Indy Chamber, I walked into Mark Fisher's office, who had done the role too. And I said, this title, like, what are we doing here, Mark? And Mark goes, Luke, everyone will have to ask you what you do for a living. So it's a great title. And I was like, all right. And
nice spin.
Yeah, it was. And I was like, okay, like we'll take that role. So that was kind of my first interaction with government, Dave, where the majority of people, like, they understand it's there, but majority of people don't want to interact with it. And if they do interact with government, they want it to be easy, right? Yeah. And we had figured out that getting your permitting and zoning regulatory stuff within the city sometimes could be a little difficult. And there was a process that you could pay people more. There was a process where you could call people, but you always weren't getting the answer, especially on the really hard projects. So my role was to help private companies and really anybody who called me a different being navigate the permitting process. It was fantastic because I learned really early, like, most people just want an answer, right? Like, if it's a no, it's a no. If it's a yes, it's a yes. And how long is it going to take? And was able to meet a lot of really cool people around the city and work on some really cool projects. And, Michael Huber had instilled, he started about a month before me, like, this role is going to help shape the future of the city. And for me, that was a ton of fun to be able to travel around. And I got to work with AES and citizens and a lot of different people to help build some really cool projects throughout the city.
That's great. So you were with the Indy Chamber for what, a couple of years?
Yeah.
And then made the leap from there over to the Indiana Department of Child Services, DCS, which, I'm sure you saw and experienced quite a bit just with some of the challenges that we still have, and it's probably heartbreaking in a lot of sense, some of the things that you saw, I can only imagine. But yeah, how did that experience shape you?
Yeah, well, let me tell a quick mentor story. Yeah. So, Bob Grant has been instrumental in a lot of things in my life. And, there was going to be an administration change. My position in the chamber was funded by the city. There was going to be an administration change, and foreshadowing, I probably needed to leave. And I get a call from Bob Grant, and he goes, hey, Mary Beth Bonaventura is looking for a deputy chief of staff at Department of Child Services. You need to go meet with her. And I was like, I don't know, Bob. Like, not really what I had in mind.
It wasn't on the bingo card.
And he was like, go over there, right? And there was like, okay, like, Bob's telling me to go do this, I'll go do it. I go meet with Judge Bonaventura, had a great conversation. But yeah, to your point, David, probably the hardest job I'll ever do, hopefully, in some instances. It is a incredibly difficult job. The family case managers in the state probably don't get enough credit for all the work they do. And it's a job where a good day you're not in the headlines. It is not. You have to be incredibly strong-minded. It is not for the weak. There's no other better way to say that. I mean, I changed my life on it, right? Like, I stopped watching TV shows. There's certain things I don't want to read about in the paper anymore. And you realize just how difficult it is for certain people. Now, at the same time, you see foster parents and people who step up and help take care of children in care. But it is a job that it was incredibly fulfilling, but incredibly hard. And it was never on the bingo card, to your point. And in fact, I remember sitting in Judge's office when she offered me the job, and I took it like February 2015, and the election, there was going to be an election in November of 16. And I said, you will get me until the election. Then I'm out. Like, this is my commitment today. And
she was the commissioner of DCS?
She was director of DCS at the time. Yeah. And she was great. I mean, there are a lot of things, like, I would tell people in your 20s and even now, like, pick up things from your bosses, right? Good things and bad things. Judge Bonaventura, people ask me why I'm direct all the time. It was, you knew where you're standing with Judge. And I love that. Like, if you were having a good day with Judge, she was going to tell you. If you're having a bad day with Judge, she was going to tell you. And for me, that was a style that I really loved. And to this day, I could call her and ask her to do something for me, and she would, and vice versa. Because you really you're in it together with those other people within the office.
Wow. I've not met Judge Bonaventura, but sounds like an amazing leader. So you're at DCS as deputy chief of staff. There's an election. You then had really what I consider sort of the opportunity of a lifetime to serve a sitting governor, Eric J. Holcomb. Tell us about how that came to be, your role and your work with him.
Yeah. I met former Governor Holcomb in like 2011, 2012, stayed in touch. He was helpful to me. Then the campaign comes around, I can't even remember the days, but the short campaign and that summer. And
like 106 days.
Or something like that. Now my friends are going to give me a hard time for not remembering this, but I help a little bit on the campaign. Actually, ironically enough, I was doing some DCS policy work, but then I've just like you've always had entrepreneurial spirit. So I was saying, here are things I could see within state government that could help, and everything was going so quick that I don't know how traditional campaigns work because I wasn't a part of one, but I remember the night he wins the election, I come home, my now wife, she had made the comment, she's like, the good guy won, right? Because there's a poll that come out before that we were behind, 20 points behind or whatever. He wins, and the next morning I sent him a text and I'm like, hey, congratulations. If there's a spot on the team, I want to be on the team. And I talked to Danny Lopez the next week, and Danny and I joke about this a lot. I don't think I heard from Danny again from like November 12th to December 27th. And at that moment, I was like, okay, I'm not going to get the job. It's great. Like,
and what was Danny doing in that time?
So Danny was the chief of staff for the LG, and then he was also, which Holcomb was the LG, and then Danny was leading the transition at that moment. And one morning, I get an email from Danny. It's like, hey, can you come over to the LG's office? And in my head, it was like, oh, we must have messed something up at DCS, right? Like I had thought in my head I wasn't going to work for the governor. And I walk in and Danny was like, hey, he wants you on the team. Here's the role, which I still to this day say the role that Danny told me about is not the role I actually did. And then started in the governor's office, January of the following year. And it was a great opportunity. I tell everybody, Dave, serve in some capacity, right? And it's funny. I think from the outside looking in, it was a great job, and I look at it, and it is a great job. It took me a year to get settled. In fact, I remember coming home. It was a Thursday night. I came home and told Sarah, I was like, I think I made a mistake. Like, I was strapped to a desk. Right? When a governor starts, you start with these bill reviews that are not fun. There's no blueprint for working for a governor. And I was like, did I make the right decision? And she was like, let's talk about it. Let's think about it. I'm sure you did. And the next day I was in the governor's office with the agency head, and I was looking around, and the governor's office is really cool. And, I'm sitting there, one of 50 governors, and I'm like, suck it up, Luke. Right. Not everybody gets this opportunity, and stayed, and it was amazing. Got to really know Earl Goode, obviously
former chief of staff.
Chief of staff. Some of my best friends. I think the part that, looking back, and I remember this when the administration ended, there's obviously policy decisions that were made that people are going to remember. But in 20 years, we're going to sit back and I'm going to be able to think about all the friends I got to work with and all the, we made a lot of positive changes, but also just going through that with somebody. It's such a tight knit bond. It's like a sports team in some instances, and it was a lot of fun.
So your role was there were several of you, like in these like operations director. Is that the role?
Yes, yeah. So I had the portfolio of I got to remember it, but I inherited economic development. I had workforce. I had infrastructure. I also worked with the BMV among licensing, among other agencies, and we really worked with the agency heads to make sure that the governor's agenda was progressing, make sure in solving problems, and working with the BMV. For a former chief of staff who was also Mitch Daniels, chief of staff was fun. I guess because there's days Earl would get a text, and it would be somebody who was like, "Well, I waited 19 minutes at the BMV today," and so Earl called me to his office, and he's like, "What's going on at the Meridian Street BMV?" And I'm like, "I don't know, Earl. What is going on?" And he's like, "Well, this person waited 19 minutes," and then I would call over to the BMV and I say, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, "Well, they did 14 transactions in 19 minutes. Like, that's pretty good, right?" And so, I learned a ton. And
because Earl was Mitch's chief for what, 7 of his 8 years?
7 of his years. Yeah. So it was, there was a lot of, and there should be, there's a ton of pride in the BMV and all the things we've done, but also got to see a lot of economic development deals, and got to be a part of, a lot of road construction projects, and then, kind of the evolution of what workforce is now, which was fun for me. And, it was a different challenge every day.
Yeah. What is something for those like I've never worked in, state government, and thankfully I have some friends, so I have somewhat of a sense. But until you're actually in it, I'm sure it's like it's different. But like, what is something that really surprised you once you got in there? Of like, wow, like had no idea. A, this would be this difficult, or B, this is how things work. Like, what's a thing or two that you could pull out from that time?
Yeah, and a positive one, I'll say it's more innovative than what people want to give it credit for.
Okay.
You can try different things. Now, the risk is if you do something really innovative and then it's a flop, people are like, well, why'd you change, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it gets enough credit for the innovation, especially in Indiana. Right? We've done some really good things around state government. I think one of the surprises is, I think sometimes people don't realize that you're just another person at the other end of the phone, right? If you could, and that's why it was so important for me today to get back to people.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you're affecting people's lives, whether or not you want to think about it that way. And, I try to be a calming presence on people when they were called and upset and get them back an answer. But, you do see people that sometimes you're like, gosh, I wish they would have, if they would have just taken 3 minutes and explained it, we could have figured this out instead of the 20 days it's taken here. But that was also the fun of it, because there were so many times you had people call and they were so upset, and you call them back the next day and say, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. And then they were so thankful. And then you'd see them around the state. And I had somebody a few weeks ago, I saw him and I was like, gosh, you look so familiar. And they were like, I was having an issue with the BMV. I'd lost my license. I couldn't find something. I got connected to you and you took care of it. And I was like, all right, we're here to help people. That's the fun of it.
Well, I can vouch for that. I feel like you were always, not that I had any major issues with the state, but you've always been very responsive, which sometimes when you interface with state government, you feel like it just goes out into the ether of like, am I going to get a response in 6 weeks? Like what, so that is definitely true. Before we move on from your, what was it, 3 years with Governor Holcomb?
A little more than 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. What's maybe your most achievement you're most proud of, or thing you're most proud of that you got to work on while you were there?
Oh man. Now you're really putting me on the spot here. There's probably some legislation, that we looked at, Dave, I don't know if there's one thing I can point to. I think the thing I can point to the most is, I went into the administration and said, I want to help people.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's somebody out there that's like, well, Luke Bosso did not help me in this, but I think in general, I think when people called, I was able to get them to the right place. And, legislation can change yearly, that we found out lately, but I think the ability to help or not help people doesn't change. And, I think that's what I'm most proud of. And I would say for everybody else in administration too, at least in the governor's office, we all kind of took that stance, which was great.
Thanks for joining us here on Talent Scout. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, so stay tuned. Whether your ROI is dollar signs or hot meals across the globe, JDA is the agency built for you. Purpose-driven brands trust JDA for branding, creative campaigns, press releases, web development, digital strategy, and paid media solutions. From fundraising initiatives to driving revenue growth, the right partner puts your organization in front of the right people at the right time. Learn more at jdaworldwide.com. Empowering the extraordinary. Well, I want to speed up here because in early 2020, right before the global pandemic broke out, I remember running into you. I think we were at Gamebridge, going into a NBA All-Star committee meeting, because that was when it was still in 21 before it got bumped back to 24. And you're like, hey, I just took a new role. I'm going to be chief of staff at IEDC, Indiana Economic Development Corp, and was super excited for you. And that was, like I said, late January of 2020. So, that, I mean, I know you were there for under 2 years, but what you experienced as chief of staff of IEDC when the pandemic, I know you had some crazy stories and experiences, but again, I would love to know how that kind of transition came about. I'm sure there was a mentor, somebody involved in terms of, helping you kind of secure that, because that's a big job.
Yeah. I mean, the governor and Earl were really instrumental. I went to one thing that Earl, that I've taken a lot from Earl. One thing I've taken from him is, you don't have to be shy about wanting to leave a job.
Yeah.
And Earl was always very vocal, was like, hey, if you want to leave, like, let me know. And late in 19, looking at another legislative session, I was just, I don't know if I can do this again. And so I went to Earl, and there was a job in the city that I wanted to apply for that there was no way I could apply for without Earl finding out. So I told Earl, I said, hey, I want to apply for this role. And he was like, sure you want to do that? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, if you would stay in state government, what role would you want? I said, I would love to go to the IEDC. It was chief operating officer at the time, but I was the chief of staff. And he goes, well, I don't think that position is going to come open. And I was like, I don't either, because I know the person in the role. Like, I was ready to leave. Yeah. And after Christmas that year, I got a phone call, and the person who was in the role said they were going to leave. And I get a phone call from the secretary, and then Earl and the governor. They're like, hey, we want you to go do it. And to your point, February 4th, 2020 is when I started. Yeah. The position changed very quickly about 20 days into it, but loved my time at in-state government, loved my time at IEDC. I was ready to go. But one of the really cool things, like, the pandemic sucked, right? There's no other way to describe that. But one of the things that it opened me up to is that's how I really got to know Ryan Kitchell. That's how I got to know Todd Richardson, Al Hubbard, and some of these folks. And, I was there for a year and a half, maybe a little longer than a year and a half, but it felt like, like my own private MBA program, because as we were reopening the states, we were still doing economic development deals. I was able to call Ryan and say, hey, what do you think about this? And so it was a fun experience.
And you guys were on the tip of the spear trying to secure like PPE, like protective equipment. I remember some of those stories. Like, what's maybe a crazy memory from that time?
Yeah, I will. I'll tell this story. So it was a Friday night, and you used to get these just emails of people like, I can get $20 million of PPE or 20 million pieces of PPE, whatever. And I get this email on Friday night, and it was forwarded from Earl. And it was a person who had said, hey, we're working with the Ohio governor's office. We can get all this PPE. Email from Earl, phone call from Earl. I was like, hey, track it down. One of the things I'm really, really bad at is when somebody says track something down, like, to me, it's like, oh, go track it down now, right? Like, don't wait. It's going to the weekend. And so I'm getting on the phone calls, I'm calling people, and I knew right away this was, in fact, I told Earl, I was like, Earl, this is a scam. Yeah. And Earl goes, well, would you rather figure out it's a scam, or do you want to be the guy that misses whatever 20 million pieces of PPE? Yeah. So we worked with was able to use some contacts, got in contact. I think the company was 3M. Call 3M. They're like, it's probably not real, but it could be real. And so I'm on the phone all night. I'm talking to all these different people. And it's like 4 a.m, and I'm on the phone with like 3M Malaysia. And the guy is like, these aren't real. This is a scam. But we started chatting about, like, could we get more PPE for the state? Yeah. And my wife comes out, and this is probably April during the pandemic. Yeah. And she was not happy. And she was like, when is this going to end? Yeah. And I was like, I remember I was like, hey man, I got to get off the phone. So I hang up the phone. I text Earl at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, Earl, it was a scam. No real PPE, blah, blah, blah. And he calls me about 6:30 that morning. And Earl has this twang about him, and people have met him. And he goes, I didn't expect for you to run it down to like last night. And I was like, well, Earl, like, I didn't want to be the guy that missed 20 million pieces of PPE. And it was like one of the things that during that time, I figured out how to do a lot of different deals. And that was just one experience. Like that experience, we learned some other things from that. There was a business person that was telling me I was making a huge mistake by not sending money to these different people. And then I was like, well, you should send money and then give it to the state. Right. Yeah. But it was a crazy experience. I should have written a book, should have written it all down, but
it's not too late.
Yeah. I'll never forget just 4 o'clock in the morning, my wife coming out and like just having that conversation. And I was like, oh, all right. Like, all right, time to go to bed.
Well, appreciate those 5 years of service from, governor's office to IEDC. I know, seems like maybe a distant memory now, but I remember talking to you through some of that and just some of the experiences that really have set you up for what you're doing today. And so I want to kind of fast forward. I know you spent a couple years with KSM. Feel free to touch on that, but I want to get to what you've been. I think you just celebrated your 3-year milestone as director of athletics for IU Indy D1 school here downtown Indy, part of the Horizon League. And remember you calling me saying, hey, I'm gonna go do this. And I want to say Earl Goode might have been involved in this decision as well. So yeah, fill us in on just making that leap from, not really at that time having much in sports business in your background, but just kind of how that opportunity came about? Because I know relationships and being visible and having a track record played a part in that.
Yeah, just on the KSM part, I would still be a KSM today if this opportunity didn't come along. They were a great company to work for, and really close with a lot of partners there and folks there, and they're a sponsor. And they've hired a student athlete every year I've been at IU Indy, so that's been really cool. But first got involved in Horizon League, actually the bubble tournament. That's when I got to meet John Leckrone and Julie Rowe-Lash, former commissioner, two former commissioners now. And when I left the IEDC, they had asked me to join the local organizing committee for the Horizon League, and we were able to do a lot of really cool things. And this opportunity came open, Dave. And I will tell you, it's funny. I got the message on LinkedIn from the recruiting firm, and at first I was like, "Is this spam?" Right? And then Julie and John called, and they were like, "Hey, you need to apply." And so I applied and went through the process. And higher ed has long interview processes, but this one actually went relatively quick. I remember it's about a 2-week process. Got to know President Witten, got to know the team at IU, and took the role. And I think one of the things that was kind of hanging out there was like we were in the process of trying to get this new arena done. And to your point, I called Jim Morris, and I called Mr. Morris. I said, "Mr. Morris, I don't want to apply for this job if I don't have your support. And if you have somebody else you're supporting, that's fine. I would just like to know." And as you know, he had a long pause, and he was like, "I support you." And I called Earl, kind of said the same thing, and Earl's like, "You would be great." And they were both Earl's still really helpful, and Mr. Morris was obviously helpful to me in a lot of ways, but helped getting the arena done with the General Assembly. And it's been fun. 3 years in, some days it feels like 30 years, some days it feels like 3 minutes, but it's been a lot of fun so far.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about that. How many student athletes are there at IU Indy?
Yeah, so we're about 300. 18 Division I collegiate sports, and then cheerleading, which is not an NCAA sport, but we have a great cheerleading squad. So 19 counting them.
Got it. What has been, there's been a lot of upheaval in college athletics the last 5 years, certainly the last 3 years, but what's maybe been the most, challenging thing you've encountered since stepping into the role?
Yeah, I'll step away from the national stuff, because I think anybody can say that, but we're not the first industry in the world to be disrupted. The hardest part for me, and you don't think about it till you get into the roles, I don't control anything on the field of play. So, once the game started, I have very little control, and, our success is measured by wins and losses. And it's one of the few industries in the world that, people can go on your website anytime and see how well you're doing, right? Like, they ignore the fact that we've set records in fundraising and season ticket sales and sponsorships. And so that part's been really hard. And then the other one, I will say, I want to be an available AD, right? I worked for a very available governor. I've worked for a lot of people that you can call and get a hold of. And, I see this picture of Mark Miles over here. Mark's always been great to me when I call and ask questions. Sometimes being an available AD, you get feedback. You get feedback on one, like, people don't really understand what collegiate athletic directors do, and then two, sometimes you get some feedback from people that you're like, "Yeah, I've thought of that," right? And it's a great advice, and I get great advice from people too, and I would say message for 20 and 30-year-old parents too, like, let your kids play. It's, if they're not playing, it's probably for a good reason. And, it's part of life is learning, that sometimes you don't get to play all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in this NIL era, it feels like parents have even a larger voice, than maybe previously. Well, what has you excited about the future of IU Indy Jaguar Athletics? I know there might be a new building in the works. So
the James T. Morris Arena, which will open later this fall. So excited. Long time coming for the campus and for the city, right? A few things, right? One, from a city perspective, we can continue to host more events downtown, right? Some of these smaller events that we've missed out in years past. So excited for that. Two, for the campus as a whole, there's never really been a place where you can bring 4,000 of our students in a building and host new student orientations, those different things. So really big for campus. And from an athletic standpoint, it's another check off the box of barriers that we can get rid of, right? We're going to have the newest arena in the conference. We're going to play men's and women's basketball and volleyball in there. It'll house our friends at USA Track and Field, which is so exciting to be able to have Max Siegel next to me every day to learn from him. And our student athletes have one place to call home. It's going to be a great thing, and super excited about it.
So it'll hold about 4,000?
Yeah, so it's about 3,800 seats, and then at the top we have a rail that another 300 people can hang out at and enjoy games.
Tell us about how the name came to be, because you mentioned Mr. Morris passed away right about 2 years ago, July of 24, and so you took the role. He was alive for about a year. How did that idea come about to name the arena after him?
Yeah, just as well as I do, if Mr. Moore's still around, he would not like the idea his name's on a building. But to your point, after he passed away, I wasn't 100% in the conversations. I think it was an idea that came from the president and her team, and what a way to honor him. I tell people, Mike Carroll was, a legend in this state. Part of the reason why, the campus is there, along with Mr. Morris, and to be able to have a building named after Mike Carroll and Jim Morris is fantastic. And I think for me, I feel some of the good pressure in being able to tell people who Jim was. Yeah. Right. You and I both in some of this, and there was no bigger champion of Indianapolis and Indiana than Mr. Morris, and it is something that we are going to make sure and let our student athletes know who he was and know why it was important to our campus. And gosh, I could get emotional talking about it, but really excited that it bears his name. Yeah.
Oh, that's super special, man. And I love seeing that when you guys came out with that a couple years ago. So, well, let's wrap up here on some more kind of personal philosophical questions. But you've mentioned some great names already, but has there been a couple key mentors that really believed in you, before you maybe even believed in yourself?
Yeah. I think one of the things I want to get across too is like mentors can come. You don't have to have one when you're 21, right? Yeah. Like sometimes it can be a little later. I mentioned Mr. Morris was great to both of us. Yeah. Earl Goode was so instrumental. I mean, I met Earl 10 years ago. I never knew him before I started in the governor's office. And Earl challenged me in ways that I didn't know existed, right? I was just like, he would treat somebody else in the office one way, and the next way is like, why didn't you get this done? And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here, right? And but he was also very direct and still is. He calls me all the time, check on things are going, and he told me he would tell me if he put a problem in front of me, expect me to solve it, right? Mm-hmm. which was fun. It was also great pressure, but and then we were getting great debates about the Pacers, which was always fun. And then another person, again, a person I met because of politics, Devin Anderson. Yeah. Met Devin when I ran for office in 2011, Franklin College grad. And I have two older sisters, and obviously my brother's the same age, but I have an older brother, and Devin is kind of taking on that role. And I heard you mention on a podcast that sometimes your mentors tell you things that you don't want to hear, and Devin plays that role in both ways for me. And he has been all in on IU Indy. He has courtside seats, tickets next to mine. He comes to events. And it's awesome because it's I think you go through this. Somebody's getting uncomfortable when people talk about you, right? Yeah. And it has been great from him and all the other people I mentioned, but been really fun to get to know him and get so close to him.
Yeah, we didn't even get into you running for office. I totally skipped that in 2011, but save that for part two. Well, those are a couple of great names for sure. Tell us about your involvement, in the community. Obviously, IU Indy, you're at a lot of the community things, but you referenced serving on the board of the Indianapolis Zoo, and anything else that's really kind of lighting you up right now?
Yeah, so I'm on the Hoosier Lottery Commission, which is a lot of fun. And then, it's actually one of the things, and I have the best wife in the world. I want to make sure I point that out. She came to me probably 2 years ago and was like, "Hey, we're probably doing a little too much." Yeah. So it's like, if you take on a new board, can you separate another one? Yeah. Obviously had a great time with Providence Christo Ray with you on the work study board. But the zoo board, I got on it partly because of Devin. He was a trustee. He recommended me for it. And now I'm on the executive committee, and I love our zoo. Yeah. So much, not just local stuff going on there, but world, conservation efforts, and it's been a lot of fun to be involved in that. And I think it's so important to be involved in, and you'll appreciate this. I got involved in the zoo young professional group when I was at the Indy Chamber. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it, I walked into the first meeting, I looked around, I didn't know anybody. And obviously I had a great affection for the zoo. I've been involved in Zoobilation well before I started doing this trustee stuff. But I was like, gosh, I could probably meet a lot of people in here. And then next thing you know, that's turned into 16 years of serving the zoo in a different capacity.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, as we land the plane here, a couple more questions. What's your best piece of advice for someone out there listening in their 20s or early 30s?
Be curious. Yeah. I think in today's world where we can have our heads down on our phones and do stuff, get to know people. Mm-hmm. I'm probably a little too nosy more than curious, but I like to know people. I like to reach out to people. Yeah. I'm a big believer. If you get to know people, you can't dislike them. Yeah. And I always say this too, from a professional standpoint, right? If you get up and read the IBJ, and then that afternoon we're meeting with a company we're trying to pitch, and you're able to make those connections, it's really big. I ask our student athletes a lot, if they're from a town, do they know the mayor? Right. Yeah. And just little things like that, be a person that people know, that you know about people and know about things going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great feedback, great advice. All right, last question I ask all my guests, and do you want to shout out that you and your lovely wife, Sarah, are just weeks away from welcoming your firstborn, which we're all excited about. But last question, how do you, Luke, define success?
Yeah, this is such a tough question for me because it's, every day I'm working to impact the lives of our student athletes or impact our city or state. And I think people trusting you in big decisions or big jobs is probably a great way to do it. I mean, I've been lucky enough that people pick up the phone and ask me to do things. And sometimes I'm like, you're asking the wrong person. They're like, no, you can do it. But, to me, that's it. And I want to make sure that every day I'm trying to be successful. The next challenge would be being a great dad. Right. I want to be, every day I try to be a great husband and because I already have a great wife. So, carrying those things on to when we meet baby boy Bosso will be really important to us.
Yeah. Well, no doubt you will be a committed father. You've had a great example, obviously, in your own dad. So excited to see you step into that role. And man, just congrats on IU Indy, because I couldn't have told you the last couple ADs. And I think you have done a tremendous job these last 3 years, just raising the profile, raising the visibility. You're out there. I see all your stuff and just getting new season ticket holders, new sponsors, and this new building coming online. And Q4 this year, I know will be huge for downtown. So,
and you guys are going to have a cool new venue to run around during the mini marathon.
That's right. Yeah. That next May we'll definitely be calling over to probably leverage that in some capacity. But anyways, man, just thanks for making time. I know you're busy coming on the show, and just excited to see what your future will hold. So,
thanks, Dave. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
Curious about what's shaping law in Indiana? From court reforms and NIL rights to mental health courts and energy commissions, the Indiana Lawyer Podcast breaks down the biggest legal issues of our time. I'm your host, reporter Maura Johnson. Join me every other week for your insider guide to what matters in law and why it impacts you. Subscribe now in your favorite podcast app or at ibjpodcasts.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.